Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and committee members. Like many of the other bills you've heard today, this bill is one step in closing loopholes in our gun safety regulations and making California communities safer. Senate Bill 1446 will prohibit the possession of large capacity ammunition magazines, defined as ammunition feeding devices holding more than 10 rounds of ammunition, although we know that these magazines can have as much as 100 rounds of ammunition. Federal law outlawed possession of high-capacity magazines as part of the 1994 federal assault weapons ban, but allowed current owners to keep them under a grandfathering provision, and that federal law was allowed to expire in 2014, in 2004. In 1999, the legislature passed SB 23, which prohibited the possession of assault weapons such as the AK-47 and created a generic definition of an assault weapon, which we tightened the definition of just a moment ago in passing the bill by Senator Hall and Senator Glazer. As part of that legislation of Senator Parada, SB 23, the importation, manufacture, and sale of large capacity ammunition magazines is prohibited. However, the possession of high capacity magazines is not prohibited. It's the guns that have them on there that are prohibited under current law. This bill prohibits the possession of these high capacity ammunition magazines. Since 1980, there have been at least 50 mass shootings where the shooter used high-capacity ammunition magazines. As pointed out earlier by Senator Hall, these magazines are military weapons. They are not designed for hunting or target shooting. They're designed to allow a shooter to fire a large number of bullets in a very short period of time. In these mass shootings, a total of 436 people were killed and an additional 425 were injured. There is actually no consistent collection or reporting of this data, but we know that many of the high-profile shootings have involved these high-capacity magazines. The San Bernardino shootings of just a month or so ago, carried out by Siad Farouk and Tafshin Malik, 4 high-capacity magazines were used. A 30-round magazine was used at the Sandy Hook massacre. A 100-round magazine was used at the Aurora movie theater shooting. And a total of 4 high-capacity magazines were found on Jared Longner when he attacked Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords in Arizona. Many of our cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Oakland, Sunnyvale, have already acted and voted to ban high-capacity magazines. By banning these weapons statewide, we would be taking a step to preventing future mass shootings and creating safer communities in California. And I would ask for your aye vote. With me today are Dr. Kevin Jones, an ER doctor at Sutter Medical Center, Amanda Wilcox from the Brady Campaign, and Ari Freilich from the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Jones. I'm an emergency physician speaking on behalf of the California chapter of the American College of Emergency Physicians, representing over 3,000 emergency physicians in the state, including our ER colleagues at Arrowhead Regional Medical Center, where I also trained and worked for several years and responded to the terrorist attacks in San Bernardino. As emergency physicians, we see the impact of firearm violence on a regular basis. In 2014 alone, we saw nearly 5,000 injuries related to firearms, with California seeing nearly 3,000 deaths. Those numbers increased in 2015. And we see the physical and psychological impact that the firearm violence has, and that physical violence is only increased by these large capacity magazines. And so we, approach this in a way that where we support sort of a common sense approach to the possession of large capacity magazines that are intended to only increase the rapid firing and killing capacity of these firearms. And so we ask for your aye vote.
Amanda Wilcox on behalf of the California chapters of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. This is actually a very narrow bill. The 99 assault weapons law banned the transfer, importation, sale of large capacity magazines. Those who already own them, the magazines, the large capacity magazines were grandfathered in. Magazines do wear out over time, and here we are 15 years later, and there's still a lot of large capacity magazines out there. And one of the problems is it's very difficult to determine which magazines were truly grandfathered and which were illegally imported or at the time legally made, because until recently a person could buy the parts to repair a magazine and build their own brand new large capacity magazine. So it's difficult to enforce the 99 law without banning the actual possession of large capacity magazines. And again, the issue is allowing the rapid fire, the continuous spray of bullets that kills so many people so quickly. And these magazines can be used in long guns and in handguns. This is actually very personal for me. My daughter was killed by a gunman who used a large capacity magazine. It held 30 rounds. She was shot 4 times at point blank range. She died with her pen still in her hand. The woman behind her was shot many times and severely injured. Another woman, this was at the behavioral health clinic in Nevada County, was killed. All that happened in a matter of seconds because he could fire 30 rounds very quickly. So I know personally how that rapid fire, continuous fire is so devastating. Every time I think about it, I'm shaken by what happened in Tucson, where that gunman had a 30-round magazine. He was, when he was trying to reload, that's when the people there were able to tackle him and stop the shooting. Young Christina Taylor Green, who, like my daughter, had a bright future, interested in making a positive difference in the world in her young age, she was killed by the 13th bullet. If it had been a 10-round magazine, she might be alive today. The Sandy Hook shooter, he had large capacity magazines and reloaded, I think, 40 times. 11 children were able to escape when he was reloading. Had he had to reload more times because he only had a 10-round magazine, more people, more kids, more first graders may be alive today. I mean, it's very clear to me that these kinds of magazines do not belong in the hands, particularly of dangerous people, but I'm not sure why they need to be in the hands of any people. And certainly hunters, I don't believe, use large capacity magazines to kill animals. So we are in strong support of this bill. Thank you.
On behalf of the Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, I echo the comments that have been made already and offer our strong support for the Chairwoman's bill. These magazines, some capable of holding up to 100 rounds of ammunition, allow a shooter to continue firing large numbers of bullets at numerous targets without reloading. They're the common thread uniting most of the high-profile mass shootings in our country, including the 1989 Cleveland Elementary School shooting in Stockton, California, where the gunman was able to fire 106 rounds in 3 minutes, shooting 35 children. The 2011 Tucson shooting, in which a gunman shot more than 30 rounds and killed or injured 19 victims, including Congresswoman Giffords, in the span of 15 seconds. The 2012 Aurora movie theater shooting, where a gunman shot 70 people in less than 10 minutes. And the 2012 Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, in which a gunman fired 154 rounds and killed 26 teachers and first graders in less than 5 minutes. In many of these incidents, the shooter was ultimately subdued only when he finally paused to reload. Laws limiting the availability of these magazines reduce the capacity for firepower and thus the potential lethality of firearms used to perpetrate these shootings. And in fact, studies have shown that in mass shootings where these magazines were used, more than twice as many victims were shot and 57% more victims were killed compared to mass shootings where the gunman used conventional magazines. And quickly to anticipate our opponent's comments, laws prohibiting the possession of these magazines have been repeatedly upheld in the federal courts, most recently by the Ninth Circuit of Court of Appeals in Fayok v. Sunnyvale, which recently upheld Sunnyvale's large capacity magazine ban, noting that the city presented credible evidence that the magazines are disproportionately used in mass shootings, as well as crimes against law enforcement, and ruled that the city maintained a strong interest in protecting the public against their potential use. California voters also strongly agree. A January 2016 California field poll confirmed that a strong majority of voters in our state support efforts to rid all California communities of these magazines. We thank the chairwoman for introducing this important legislation and urge you to vote aye.
Do we have other witnesses in support?
Lydia Bourne, representing American Academy of Pediatrics, in strong support.
Sylvia Solis-Shaw on behalf of the City of Los Angeles, Mayor Eric Garcetti, and on behalf of the City of Santa Monica, both in strong support. Thank you.
Alex Gibbs on behalf of the City of Oakland.
Do we have additional members beyond that? Do we have people who would like to witness in opposition? If you'd come down to the table, that'd be great.
Chairman and members, Sam Paredes representing Gun Owners of California. Again, it's important for you to have some perspective about the facts of this. The reason that the legislature didn't ban the possession of high-capacity magazines is because they considered that it would be a government taking. They would be denying people their private property, which they legally acquired and possessed, and could not afford to pay for them, to recompense the people for the denial of their use of private property. That's why they accepted the grandfather clause. That is not an issue that has been before the court. It will be, I guarantee it. Number two, we come up here and we hear these 100-round and 200-round double snail magazines used in commission of a crime. First of all, they're rarely ever used in the commission of a crime. Most of the time, what is considered a high-capacity magazine is the standard magazine that came with the firearm when it was manufactured and delivered to the stores and then to the purchaser. We're talking about guns that hold 11 to 17 or 18 rounds. That is a high-capacity magazine, which we consider to be a misnomer. We think it is a standard capacity magazine. The Glock 17, guess how many rounds it was originally designed to come with? 17 rounds. The firearm that our military accepted, a commercially available private gun, the Beretta 92, holds 14 rounds. And these are the guns. Law enforcement has chosen to use these guns. As a matter of fact, our law enforcement officers who are carrying SIGs and Glocks, Beretta 92s, use these with their standard capacity magazines for a reason, because that is what they may need in order to defend themselves and to appropriately apply the laws and protect the citizens of California. Why should it be any different for a law-abiding citizen? Why should they be put at a disadvantage than our law enforcement officers when they possess the guns for the same purpose, to protect themselves? Now, we're talking about 90-some% of all magazines that fall into this category of 11 rounds and 18 rounds. But when we see the pictures, we see these long magazines and double snake drums and all of these cool things that if you check with the manufacturers are actually rather rare and very expensive. So those are not. Again, we are here to talk about gun control instead of crime control. Any criminal can go anywhere and get or make a magazine of whatever they want and use it in the commission of crime. We should be going after them. We shouldn't be going and putting law-abiding citizens at a disadvantage of protecting their lives by limiting the number of rounds. Now, I know that there are a lot of people on this on the dais who are probably not really familiar with guns. With a little bit of practice, you can do a lot of things. As a matter of fact, I know a guy who can shoot 60 rounds from a revolver in under 8 seconds. Just a little bit of practice, a lot of practice on his case, but that's what can happen. Are we going to ban revolvers that can shoot 6 rounds now? Again, it isn't the magazines, it's the criminals, and as long as we're going to deny, again, we're special here in California. We don't pay attention to the Constitution. In this case, although we do argue it is a Second Amendment issue, it is also a government taking which is unconstitutional. We are being denied. The author's going to say, oh, you can turn them into the police, you can destroy them, you can sell them out of state. I'm here to tell you there is no market for used magazines outside of the state of California coming from magazines. That is still a taking. That's a fact. And if you want to deal with facts and you want to make a decision, as has been pointed out, to take the chance of violating the Constitution, us going to court, the state taxpayers paying millions of dollars to send attorneys in order to find that this law is ultimately unconstitutional, we are up to the challenge. And thank you very much. I hope you will oppose this bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ed Woodley with the National Rifle Association. The amazing thing about this bill and about this debate in general is that I am probably the only person in this room who can tell you why the magic number is 10. Ask yourself, why is the magic number of the magazine capacity 10? Why isn't it 9? Why isn't it 8? Why isn't it 11? You know why? Because when the original bill was going through the legislature here, that's the deal that was cut with law enforcement. That's why it's 10. Not because 10-round magazines are any safer, because that was a political deal that was cut in the building. So to have this arbitrary number of 10-round magazine is totally, completely arbitrary. The matter of fact is that if you try to, in many of the 10-round magazines, you can force an 11th cartridge into the magazine. Now, it won't function, but if you have an uninformed law enforcement officer and they're sitting there testing the magazine, and they really push on the magazine, they can get 11th round into the magazine. Now, the way the bill is I may not even own a gun that goes with the magazine I possess. But I am now a criminal because I possess a steel tube with a spring and a follower that can hold more than 10 rounds. 10-round magazines can't accept more than 10 rounds. It won't function, but it will. So here we are trying to confiscate people's property, and that's where we are. Again, I find it fascinating as we watch the legislative process this year, we're decriminalizing a whole bunch of other activities and a whole bunch of other vices, a whole bunch of other things that people are doing. And the act of decriminalizing all these things, we're saying, well, we don't want to put people in jail for this. Oh, this is an inadvertent mistake. Oh, this is our harmless crime. So what we're going to do is, with all the law enforcement resources we have trying to keep our society together, what we're going to do here is we're going to add a crime of a person having a device they've had for 20 years, 25 years, who may not know the legislature passes a bill. This gentleman or lady is on back and forth on the way to the range, and they get pulled over by a law enforcement officer. The officer does their due diligence, and they give them the ticket of what they're supposed to do. And they find, when they're searching the car, an evil, high-capacity magazine. Now this person gets thrown into the judicial grinding mill. And we're going to clog the courts up. You know how many magazines are out there like this that are grandfathered in? Hundreds of thousands are out there. And for the people who came here and testified, that they can't tell the difference between a new magazine that's polymer and an old Colt magazine that's 25 years old, perhaps before they come to the legislature and testify, they ought to bone up on their facts. Everybody who knows anything about guns can spot a grandfather magazine and knows what they're doing. But what we're going to do is we're going to put officers in the thing of starting to arrest people who've not committed a crime and not done anything wrong at all. The very fact that you own a box that has a spring in it, that has a follower in it, has a thing in it, that could theoretically hold the magic number of over 10 cartridges is going to be banned. And what we're going to do is clog up the criminal justice system. We're going to cause a whole bunch of people to get arrested. And all these other issues are going to happen. So when we testified against this bill originally, and I was here, we were told, oh, don't worry about it, you guys can keep your magazines. What we in the NRA have always said, and what you're seeing here today by all the bills that are being brought here is, we have told the citizens of the United States, the agenda that we're seeing is confiscation. The confiscation is brought about by the incremental taking people's rights away from them. So guess what? We're at the end of the road now. Where we started is where we told you it was going to go. We are now at confiscation. That's where we are. So if you feel you want to confiscate people's private property from them and criminalize a mere possession of aluminum or steel box with a spring in it, then you support the bill. If you believe that we ought to clog our court system and put people in jail, because that's what's going to end up happening, then vote for the bill. And you will tell everybody else the NRA was right, that what you want to do is ban and confiscate firearms, and that's where we are, and that's where we told you it was going to go. So who has been misleading the public? It's the advocates who've come in this room time and time again and denigrated people's right to protect themselves and protect and own their firearms. As a little side fact is that hunting has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. Nothing. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. The Second Amendment is about a law-abiding citizen who has a fundamental right to own firearms for self-protection of themselves and their families. It has nothing to do with hunting. So people come in and say, well, you don't need this for hunting. That's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the debate. But here we are at the end of the road. And what we're going to see years to come now is the bills we've heard earlier today that talk about registering this and registering that. What it's going to lead to is what we are at today. We are at the end of the road of this today. We are here for confiscation. And if you don't turn your magazine in and law enforcement doesn't confiscate you by a magic date, you will trip across that calendar line and you will be a criminal for owning something you've owned for 30 years and you've never committed a crime. So here we are. We're right where we in NRA said we're going to be. We're at confiscation. That's why we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Craig DeLuz with the Firearms Policy Coalition. I think it's important to note, and I wanted my colleagues to testify first because they have a breadth of history. And so when you start to see the line move, and you start to see the goalposts continually moved on the citizens who are doing nothing more than exercising their constitutional rights. There is no group within our society that is more regulated than gun owners in the state of California, simply for exercising their constitutional right. The mere implication, the mere possession of certain items are deemed to be evil. Once again, the federal statistics that the author and the majority of this committee don't believe exist tell you that rifles as a whole are used in about 3% of all crimes. Rifles with semi-automatic rifles are a smaller percentage of that. Rifles that include standard capacity magazines are an even smaller percentage of that. So once again, we're talking about not just banning an item, because the statement was made earlier, well, this is a ban. This is not a ban, this is confiscation. This is now, once again, as was stated earlier, the taking of private property. And I will beg to differ with my colleague on one point. There are not hundreds of thousands of these magazines out there. I am quite confident there are millions of these magazines that are out there. And if you're going to take an individual's private property and offer no remuneration, offer no compensation? Is the state of California prepared to duly compensate these individuals for the confiscation of their rightfully owned, and legally purchased property? You see the line constantly moving, and once again, this committee just passed out another ban out of this committee earlier today, and the question is we're supposed to believe, well, don't worry, we're not coming after your stuff. And now here we are. How long? How long before the next group of legislators are sitting here and we're now saying, well, you know, we're going to come after that now? At a certain point, you know, and I think that, and I've heard this a number of times, all we want is reasonable gun laws. Well, when do we hit reasonable? California has the strictest gun laws in the entire country, and yet still here we are, looking at confiscation. This measure, this idea has been shopped to this legislature over the last few years, and it has failed and it has been vetoed simply because it is simply not right. It is for this reason that we oppose this measure.
Do we have any other witnesses in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members, Corey Selzillo on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association in opposition.
Brett Griffith on behalf of California Rifle and Pistol Association oppose.
Okay. Members, do you have any questions?
Yes.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been sitting on the Public Safety Committee now. This is my second year, and it's just very frustrating that I continually see bills that water down laws that go to the benefit of criminals, and we don't strengthen laws for the benefit of our victims, and yet today we want to make criminals out of law-abiding citizens that have been collecting guns and gun equipment. And I've sat very quiet through a lot of these gun bills today. And the fear of Second Amendment right advocates has certainly come home to roost in Sacramento today as we witness a new form of eminent domain on gun owners, private citizens that legally own guns, that the government now wants to take their gun equipment. At least with eminent domain, you get paid for your property, but the government wants to take your property now and not even compensate you for it. The word confiscation scares the heck out of a lot of citizens in this country and in the state of California, and I'm sure many of you have received hundreds of phone calls from a lot of pro-Second Amendment rights people saying, please vote no against these bills, not take our Second Amendment rights away. I want to thank the advocates that come up here panel after panel, year after year. If this bill is successful and if it is signed by the governor, I think the precedent has been set that the government can and will, if they can, confiscate your guns. It will be future legislatures that will look at what appears to be an assault rifle that is used by the military, that is used in competitions. We talked about the 3-gun competitions. And we will have confiscation of rifles, which incidentally are used in 2.5% of the crimes in the state of California. And certainly, we want to do everything we can to stop the horrific mass shootings that we've seen at schools, and certainly the incident in San Bernardino. But we have to remember that, you know, criminals don't follow the law. It was mentioned that we have millions of these high-capacity magazines that exist all over the country. And most of them are held by law-abiding citizens in their collections. And in fact, the city of Los Angeles enacted a bill or a law, an ordinance, very similar to the one that is being proposed here today. It's passed. And if you ask the LAPD how many magazines have been turned in, they will opine that not one has been voluntarily turned in, and I will opine that this becomes law. There will not be a magazine that will be submitted to the government to confiscate it, but I also trust that the advocates will take this to court as an infringement on our Second Amendment rights, and I believe that the courts will opine that our Second Amendment rights have been compromised. So, my friends, it seems to me that this is going to be a debate that's going to be continuing on. We have obviously philosophical differences on the interpretation of the Second Amendment. But to me, this is the most damning threat against legitimate gun owners in the state of California. It should be a wake-up call. It's bills like this that gun owners or gun dealers love. I can guarantee you this week, you're going to see a lot of these weapons that are being threatened. You're going to see high sales of these guns because people are going to say, I want to get these guns before the government tells me I can't have them anymore. We're a body that's supposed to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California. And I regret to see that our Second Amendment rights in accordance with our U.S. Constitution is being threatened here today in the state capitol. And for that reason, I'm not going to be able to support this bill.
Do we have other senators with questions? Senator Monty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to correct, there were some representations made that this bill is about confiscating weapons and taking away firearms. That's not what the bill does. The bill says as a matter of public policy, multi-ammo clips have been proven to give shooters greater kill power. That's what they're developed for. And as a matter of public policy, this bill proposes that California, along with other cities, other jurisdictions, would limit the number of bullets in an ammo clip. It does not talk about any class of weapon that's going to be taken away or removed from the market. So I just think we should be focused on what this bill does. Mr. Chair, I'm glad to move the bill at the appropriate time.
Thank you. We have a motion. I do have a couple quick questions. For the Department of Justice, do we have any estimate of how many of these ammo clips are out there, ammo magazines are out there?
Because they're not tracked and regulated, it would be hard to speculate, but I would agree with some of the individuals that were up here. They're probably in the millions.
Okay. And then if I could have somebody who spoke in opposition when the witnesses, are there, if they could work their way back up here. We certainly know of the case in Georgia, Mrs. Herman. It was last year was very popular in all the press about the woman with the small children who there was an intruder. She went through 3 doors, locking them and moving up to her attic to hide with her children as the person would break down the door one after another, coming for her and her kids. And she had a weapon. Now, it wasn't a high-capacity magazine, but she unloaded 6 rounds, I believe 5, hit the intruder. It was enough of a deterrent that he got into his car and he drove away. The police apprehended him later. Had he had somebody with him, would that high-capacity magazine been of use to her? Perhaps yes. I think so. But are there any stats showing how often those types of weapons are used for home defense or personal defense by men and women? And if there's a breakdown of how many women's lives have been saved because of that, I'm just curious.
Senator, thank you for the question. We do know, and we agree that more research is needed, but the research, the body of research that out there indicates that, and I'm just going to go with the number that Attorney General Janet Reno went with while she was the Attorney General of the United States. She reported that 1.5 million times a year law-abiding citizens use guns to successfully defend themselves, 1.5 million. We know that the research that was provided to her indicated that that number was probably closer to 3 million, and through a variety of changes and edits, they came down and admitted that at least 1.5 million times a year. Now, California happens to be about, what, 20% of the population of the country, and at least 10% of everything that happens nationwide happens in California. So you're looking at 150,000 times a year, the law-abiding citizens use guns to defend themselves in the state of California. Most of the times, many times, it's admitted, even law enforcement will admit it, that they're not reported because they're fearful of the process of reporting that. But those that are reported, you know, they find that they are justified. And in the case that you are absolutely correct, the woman did everything correctly. She gathered her children, she took them to an attic. An intruder broke in through the door, came in after him, saying that he was going to kill them. And she used this small revolver that she had, shot all the rounds in the revolver, hit the perpetrator. He got out, got into his car, and started to drive himself to the emergency ward. Had he had an accomplice, she would have had no ability to protect herself at that point in time. So that is not an uncommon scenario, Senator. You know, that's why law enforcement officers are no longer limited to having 6-round revolvers with a couple of speed loaders. That's why they are using semi-automatic handguns that have capacities to shoot up to 18 rounds, because they cannot be placed in a defensive disadvantage. They're not standing there with 24 and 50-round magazines, and your average citizen isn't either. They're using the standard magazines that came with the gun that had 11 to 18 rounds. That constitutes more than 90% of all of the high-capacity magazines.
Now, this is an open question to Department of Justice or whoever would like to answer this. Of the shooting incidences that were brought forward earlier, were those all with legal weapons, with legal capacity, with legal, or were some of those gray market or black market, or did they purchase them not from a gun dealer?
It really depends on the incident and in the state that it happened. For instance, the San Bernardino shooting, those guns were purchased legally. However, they were converted to illegal weapons, and the high-capacity magazines that they had were illegal here in California. How they got them, we do not know.
Okay. Maybe we could hear from the Brady. I know that you're terrific with statistics, so I didn't know if you had a statistic to share with us on this issue.
The shooter in Tucson and in Aurora and in Sandy Hook were not prohibited. So my assumption is that they are law-abiding. They've got their guns legally. You know, I take the gun lobby at their word when they say that most of their members are law-abiding. And I would assume the law-abiding people would follow this law. And unfortunately, law-abiding people sometimes become very unstable, and then they do these horrific acts.
Thank you. Look, all these shootings are horrible. And the idea that somebody could have so many rounds on them to really attack and force is outrageous. But on the flip side, as I look at the issue, you know, we haven't been able to stop the spread of drugs. We haven't stopped drugs coming across our borders, but we're going to somehow stop high magazine capacity from coming across our borders for those who choose to do illegal acts. Seems much more difficult. And then I weigh it against the fact that if you're a slightly built person, whether you're male or female, and somebody menacing is coming at you, don't you have a right to protect your home, your children, yourself? it's difficult for me to support this bill today because I can't help but think of all those women, the Mrs. Hermans of the world, that we are denying them the ability to live in a free society where they're not worried about being assaulted or attacked in their own home. I just think, and I have gone to the range. I periodically practice with my weapon so that if I'm ever confronted, that I'll be accurate and cool and calm. And all I can think about is how often, if I'm excited to be there, and there's a certain joy and release when you fire one of those weapons at a target, that my blood gets pumping and my accuracy gets off. And I reflect on that person where the attacker is coming through 3 doors to get at her and her children, and how her hand must be shaking as she's trying to protect her family. And what if she didn't hit him 5 out of the 6 rounds? What if she hit him once and was just enough to anger him further? I think that when you draw a weapon in self-defense, you're not doing it as a careless act. You're doing it as an act to protect yourself. And if she had waited for law enforcement, their sheriff in Georgia said that she would have been a victim because they couldn't possibly respond in time. Much of my district is rural San Diego County, and at the best, and the sheriff do a fantastic job, but sometimes it takes 10 minutes, sometimes 15 minutes if there's a lot of activity. That's not a reasonable amount of time to allow a woman or a person that feels endangered to be able to protect themselves. And so I'm worried moving forward with this that we'll create more harm than good, because I don't believe that this bill will stop somebody who intends on hurting people and violate the law in hurting them, not working within the law, but outside the law, from actually getting the high magazine capacity. You know, we look back, and a few years ago, there was a big bank robbery in Los Angeles. All the equipment that the shooters had were illegal. They had the best weapons, the best protection, things that you can't buy on the open market, and yet they were able to procure them as they worked their way through the city, shooting up everybody and everything in sight. So I apologize because I love the author, and I think she does a fantastic job, but this is not a bill I'll be supporting today. With that, we have a motion, and I would like to give you an opportunity to close. Senator Hancock.
Thank you. If I could just start by having the folks from DOJ show us what the magazines look like. This can be brief. And while you're having a look at those, I will try to respond to many of the issues that were raised. And I would note that the example of the woman and children in the attic was 5 to 6 rounds. I don't know what her magazine would have taken, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about 10 rounds or more. We're talking about a situation where a 100-round magazine was used in the Aurora Theater, leaving, I think it was 60 people dead. We're talking about 14 people killed and 21 injured with 30-round magazines in San Bernardino, California. We are talking about every life that we can save by prohibiting the possession of these high-capacity magazines is a family that is not torn apart, and communities that are safer. I would note that a recent PPIC survey found that 57% of the people in California are concerned about the threat of a mass shooting in their community. Think about simply the peace of mind of realizing that we have a big loophole here. We prohibit importation, manufacture, and sale of these magazines and guns, but possession of the high-capacity magazines is a glaring loophole. We closed a little bit of it by prohibiting the conversion kits or repair kits, which were used to convert guns to high-capacity magazine guns, and we can do this now. It is not a taking. We allow guns to be sent out of state, to be sold out of state, or they can be turned in to law enforcement. And I would note that of the communities that have already passed these bans, Sunnyvale and San Francisco, the preliminary injunctions were denied by the courts, which found that dealing with these high-capacity magazines narrowly tailored to a compelling government interest in public safety, they would not impose a preliminary injunction. I believe that this will stand, and I believe that we will not eliminate gun ownership for responsible people, but we will be giving a sensible safeguard to our families and our children in mostly public places where they congregate, and I would ask for your aye vote.
Members, we have a motion to appropriations. May we have a roll vote, please?
Hancock?
Aye.
Hancock, aye. Anderson?
No.
Anderson, no. Glazer? Leno? Aye. Leno, aye. Liu? Monning?
Aye.
Monning, aye. Stone? No. Stone, no.